everyone, welcome to 10-Minute Physiology. In today's video, I'm going to give you a short introduction to the nervous system. So with that, let's give it a go. So in today's video, we're going to talk about three main topics. The first topic we're going to talk about is the subdivisions of the nervous system. The second is going to be the main types of cells in the nervous system. And the third is the general structure of the neuron. So with that, let's talk about the three subdivisions of the nervous system. So the nervous system can be divided into three different subdivisions. The first subdivision is the central nervous system, and this is going to be comprised of the brain, spinal cord, as well as cranial nerve number 2 and the retina. The second subdivision is going to be the peripheral nervous system, and this is basically going to encompass everything else. And we're going to talk about the peripheral nervous system in more detail in a little bit. And then the third subdivision is going to be the autonomic nervous system. The autonomic nervous system is going to be made up of parts from the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. So these are the three different subdivisions of the nervous system. So now that we know the three different subdivisions, before we talk about them in a little bit more detail, I want to go through four important definitions that we're going to see throughout other nervous system videos. So the first definition is nuclei, and these are going to be neurons in the central nervous system that are aggregated together and share similar functions. The second definition is going to be sensory nerves. These are nerves that carry messages from the periphery to the central nervous system, and they're also going to be called afferent nerves. And then the third is going to be motor nerves. These are nerves that carry messages from the central nervous system to the periphery. Motor nerves are also called efferent nerves. And then the last definition is peripheral ganglia. These are going to be groups of nerve cells that are concentrated together outside the central nervous system. So now that we have these four definitions, let's look at the three subdivisions in a little bit more detail. So remember that the three subdivisions of the nervous system are the central nervous system, the peripheral nervous system, and the autonomic nervous system. So the central nervous system is made up of the brain, spinal cord, cranial nerve number 2, and the retina. The peripheral nervous system is going to be made up of peripheral ganglia, sensory receptors, peripheral portions of spinal and cranial nerves except for cranial nerve number 2, as well as afferent and efferent nerves. And then the last part, the autonomic nervous system, is going to be composed of parts from both the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. So these are the three subdivisions of the nervous system. So now that we know the three main subdivisions of the nervous system, let's talk about the main types of cells that we see in the nervous system. So there are two main types of cells in the nervous system. These are going to be neurons and glia. So neurons are going to be responsible for electrical communication, and their structure can actually vary throughout the nervous system. Glia cells, also called neuroglia cells, are not the primary signaling cells, but they are also going to have many different functions, and we're going to talk about these different functions in future videos. So these are the main two types of cells that we see in the nervous system. So now what I would like to do is look at the general structure of a neuron more closely. So the general structure of a neuron is as such. So here is a picture of a neuron, and the first part that we're going to look at this picture is going to be the cell body or soma. So the cell body or soma is going to contain the nucleus, the endoplasmic reticulum, and the Golgi, and it's going to be responsible for many essential life functions of the cell, and this is going to include protein processing and synthesis. So the cell body is where a lot of the organelles are going to be found, and it's going to be responsible for many life functions. The second part we're going to look at are the dendrites. So the dendrites are mainly going to be these projections that extend from the soma, and these dendrites are going to be responsible for receiving information from neighboring cells. The third part is going to be the axon. So the axon is this long projection that is going to send information from the direction of the cell body to the end of the axon. So let's take a look at the structure of the axon more closely. So if you were to look at an axon or a picture of an axon, which we have right here, we can find many different parts. So the first part is the axon hillock. So the axon hillock is the beginning of the axon, and we see it's this bulge that comes off of the soma or cell body of the neuron. The next part of the axon is going to be the initial segment. So the initial segment is an unmyelinated region of the axon where an action potential is going to begin. Another part that we can see on some axons is something called the myelin sheath. So some neurons have a myelin sheath. The myelin sheath is going to be made up of glial cells that wrap themselves around the axon. And the myelin sheath is really good for providing insulation to the cell, so it allows electrical signals to travel better, quicker, and further. So the next part that we can see on myelinated axons is going to be the node of Ranvier. So the nodes of Ranvier are unmyelinated segments of myelinated axons. And then the last part that we're going to look at is the internode. So the internode is pretty much the distance from one node of Ranvier to another node of Ranvier. So these are some things that we can see on axons. So now that we saw the axon, let's look at the last part of the neuron that we're going to look at. So the last part is going to be the presynaptic terminals. So the presynaptic terminals are the endings at the end of an axon, and they are usually responsible for converting an electrical signal into a chemical signal. The chemical signal is then released into the synaptic cleft where it can interact with other cells. So this then brings us into something called the synapse, which is another important definition. So a synapse is going to comprise of the presynaptic terminal, the cell membrane of the target cell, which is also called the postsynaptic membrane, and the space between the two membranes, which is called the synaptic cleft. And we have already a bunch of videos on the synapse in our playlist labeled Synaptic Transmission under the Neurophysiology section of this channel. So if you want to learn more about synaptic transmission and synapses, you can check that out in that playlist of my channel. So that's it for this video. I hope this video helped you have a general understanding of the nervous system and some of those important definitions that we're going to see over and over and over again. And I hope to see you in the next video. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you next time.